Hello and welcome to Mindful Living, where we explore the art of living with the intention, balance, and inner peace. I am Avik, your host, guiding you through conversations on health, meditation, mental well being, mindfulness, and the mind body connection. Each episode features expert insights to help you grow, heal, and thrive. So, take a deep breath, relax, and join us on this journey to a more mindful and fulfilling life. So, let's get started.
Hello and welcome, listeners, to the Mindful Living podcast with your host, Sana. Today, we have an extraordinary guest, Ray Martin, also known as the Daily Explorer. Ray is an entrepreneur, award winning business leader, marathon runner, fundraiser, coach, mentor, and mindfulness teacher. After a major life upheaval in 2005, Ray embarked on a 6-month sabbatical that turned into a 14-year journey of personal transformation. His experiences led him to write his book, Life Without a Tie, where he shares the 6 rules for happiness that have guided him on his path to living more authentically. And in today's conversation, Ray will share insights from his journey, the lessons he has learned about life, and how we can apply these powerful principles to live more purposefully. So let's get ready and dive right into this conversation. So, Ray, welcome to the show, and it's an absolute honor to have you with us.
Thank you so much. And what a lovely introduction. That's lovely. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Ray. So you had a very successful career as a CEO before your life took an unexpected turn. What was
Mhm.
going through your mind when you decided to leave everything behind and take that 6-month sabbatical?
Well, it's interesting that you say I had a very successful career because that's one of the things that was apparent, obviously, to me was I've been materially successful, got good sales results and results for the clients we worked with, and that had produced a really good income. And so materially, life was very comfortable.
Mm-hmm.
But I never felt in that role or in that part of my life that I was kind of doing something I really loved. It's a weird feeling because I never made sense to me at the time. I just always used to have this sense that I was kind of living someone else's life in a way. And I never got to the bottom of that, but I wasn't completely content or happy. And my business partner happened to be the woman I was married to. So we built the business together for 10 years and it was brilliant. We were a great partnership and we worked really well together. And then one day she came back from a meeting and suddenly announced that she was leaving the marriage and the company.
Oh, okay.
And it was a real shock. And it really was a huge, huge shock to me.
Mm-hmm.
Never saw it coming. And it made me realize, wow, something's not right here because I didn't even know this was going to happen. It was very unexpected. And at the same time, to compound it, my father got very unwell and he died at the same time. And so those circumstances were very, very difficult for me. I didn't know anything about mindfulness at the time.
Mm-hmm.
I just felt kind of completely broken, sort of ripped into pieces. And it was very hard. I struggled a lot. And that's when friends of mine rallied around and said, why don't you take a 6-month sabbatical and go and do something completely different for a while and reflect on what's happened, maybe find a way to heal some of this in yourself.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what got me inspired to the idea. That's how the circumstances were when it started. Yeah.
Interesting. That's interesting, Ray.
Mm.
So your journey, although you decided for a 6-month, your journey ended up lasting 14 years.
Yes.
How did that happen? How did that extended period of exploration change your perspective on life and your approach to joy, fulfillment?
Yeah. Yeah, it's a great question. And it's a long answer. This is why I wrote a book about the journey, because there's so much to say about it.
Uh-huh.
But essentially what was going on with me was that I'd left my old life to go on a sabbatical. So I was in Asia, I was backpacking. So I was anonymous there. No one knew me or my history or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
And I was in some beautiful set, like in Thailand and countries like this. It's beautiful trees and beaches and the ocean, and everything's lovely on the surface. But
Mm-hmm.
inside, I felt very agitated, and I felt a lot of guilt and shame about the marriage ending, and I hadn't been a particularly great husband, and I'd sort of let myself down in some of those areas, and I was constantly had noise in my mind all the time, being self-critical and things like this. And a fellow traveler I met suggested I did a Vipassana meditation retreat, and I said, "Wow, what's that? I had no idea what that was, Sana." And he told me, he described it, and he said, "You go into a monastery for 10 days and you sit with the monks and you meditate, and each day they teach you something about the Dharma and the Buddhist teaching." It sounded to me like a wonderful idea, even though I was quite nervous because I've never been silent for even 10 minutes, let alone 10 days.
Right.
And but I thought, yeah, I don't know if you get this sense yourself, but when you hear and feel things like this being said, there's a part of you inside yourself, like I call your inner wisdom. It's a kind of quiet voice that says, that's the right thing for you to do right now.
That's
and
right.
it kind of transcends your rational thinking. And it just lets you know you've got to do that. Whether you like it or not, you've got to do it.
Sure.
And that was the voice that told me I must do that Vipassana retreat. And after I did, I came out of the monastery, and it was like if I had a volume knob on the side of my head, like a radio, and it was up at 9 or 10 out of 10 when I went into the monastery with the noise.
Mm-hmm.
When I walked out, it was like someone turned it down to like a 1 or a 2. And I just felt completely different. And I knew there was something very powerful in the whole way of living with mindfulness. I just knew I needed to pursue that and evolve that and develop that and deepen that practice. And that's how it started.
That's lovely. It's lovely. So in your book, Life Without a Tie, you outline 6 rules for happiness.
Yeah.
According to you, how do you define happiness, firstly? And if you could briefly walk us through your perspective on life and your approach to happiness.
Yeah, I can briefly. It's a really great question because obviously the events that I've described already made me deeply question how I had defined success in the first place, because to me, success and happiness were completely interdependent. I now understand, having deeply understood my own mind and how things work, that happiness has got nothing to do with the achievement of specific goals and outcomes. The Buddhists call that, sort of temporary cessation of suffering. When you achieve something for a short while, everything's okay, but then the craving cycle starts again, and you go round the loop that they describe in their teaching. And so my view of happiness now is, can I sit at the end of every day and say to myself, I feel really okay with how I've lived today. I feel like I've lived from my values. I feel like I've been kind. I feel like I've been a contributor to myself, my family, my community. And I have a sense of peace and contentment with how I've been in those moments of that day. Then I feel like happiness is for me much more defined in each moment, how I'm showing up and living true to myself in those moments. That's my measure of happiness now.
Wow.
That's hard for perhaps some other people that might be listening to this to take on board, because we live in a material world and we have to pay our bills and buy things and food and things like this. So of course we need to have money and create that as well. So that has to be done. But I feel like I can approach my work in a much more humble, kind of mindful way than I used to. And that's where the 6 rules came from, because when I wrote the book, a lot of people were asking me, what have I learned from those 14 years? And so I distilled the learning into these 6 rules. And that's why they exist.
So one of the rules you mentioned is to fully own everything that happens.
Yeah.
You can give any example or any anecdote or anything of how taking full responsibility of your life has empowered you.
Yeah, totally. I mean, my first example is, I could have blamed my ex-wife for my unhappiness when she decided to leave, and I could have said I could have done nothing much about that, and had a kind of a life of suffering or mediocrity, or just let those events determine what my life looked like and how it went from there. And I could always blame her and say it was her fault she left. That would have been very disempowering choice, I feel, for me, if I'd taken that way of processing it. Because actually, if I looked at deeply under the surface of those events, it occurred to me that I had been complicit in those events happening, that in the way I'd behaved and the things that I'd done or not done in that relationship, I'd sowed the seeds of those events taking place. It was actually my creation that brought that about. Yeah, she had a part to play, of course, but actually I was more interested in what can I learn from the part that I played? How could I own this and see it from a perspective of I've actually created this to help my life for some reason. I know I don't like it, but I've actually done this to help myself grow or evolve or change. And actually, it's got a useful purpose here. That's how I would see ownership. And so many people, at work, if something's not gone right, they'll look for someone to blame, or they'll make excuses, or they'll just wait and hope sometimes that it fixes itself without even addressing it.
That's true.
And I see that a lot, in the people that I coach, because I coach a lot of people in the business world. So that's quite common.
I know. It's a kind of self-introspection you have to do.
Yeah, exactly. So that was really, if you live as if, none of these rules are absolute, but if you were to live every day as if you create 100% of what happens to you around you, and you owned it, you'd have a lot more personal power to shift and change in the direction that you want to move in, definitely. Because there's no external circumstance that really is holding you. You can think that as convenient sometimes to attach to an external circumstance, but that's not really the truth. The truth is you're choosing to let that stand in the way. And that's really, when you take ownership, that's how it might look.
Yeah, that's true. And in what way mindfulness or that journey of meditation helped you become aware of or cultivating the practice of self-introspection and becoming aware of action?
Yeah, that's a great question. When you go, I don't know if you've traveled much, Sana, and you go to a city that you've not been to before, you can buy some souvenir. And some of them are these snow globes. They're like a plastic dome full of clear liquid.
Yes.
And you shake up the thing and lots of snowflakes swirl around and they hide the object that's in the globe. If it's the Eiffel Tower in Paris, let's say. And so it's only when you put the globe down on the table and just let it settle, and you stop shaking it and you let all the things settle to the bottom, and then you can see the image of the tower really clearly.
Right.
Now, this is a metaphor because that shaking of the globe is the equivalent of thinking. When we're thinking, we're shaking, we're agitating our mind, we're stimulating our mind more and more by thinking, especially when we've got problems, because we think, I'll just think my way through this problem. And the more we think, the worse it gets. We go round in loops, sometimes caught in thought spirals, I call them. And if you were able to just be still and be quiet and just let all that thinking fall away for a bit, everything settles down, and then you can sort of see and hear your wisdom, your innate wisdom, the voice of your inner wisdom we talked about earlier. But you don't really get to see or hear that until everything's quietened down. And that's really been the massive, massive value of meditative practice for me, because every time I sit quietly, I feel like I'm sort of recharging my mindfulness batteries. A bit like when you plug your phone in every night to recharge the phone. Then once it's fully charged, you can use all the apps on the phone, and you can apply the phone to different tasks. And I feel the same. When I've done my mindfulness practice and meditation, I'm fully charged with mindfulness energy. And then I can apply myself in conversations in a much more calm way, in a state of equanimity with people, and be less reactive and more compassionate and things like that. when I'm in that practice, when I'm in the flow of that practice. So it's really helped me and really served me and continues to on a daily basis.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that's a beautiful metaphor. Beautiful metaphor. So, Ray, you have said that creating powerful, purposeful, and sustainable relationships is key to happiness. So, what have you learned about building these kind of relationships during your travels?
Lots and lots. I mean, I returned from the journey in 2019 to finish writing the book, which got published a little while ago. And a lot of the people I met in the 28 countries I was in or lived in or traveled through, a lot of those people I'm still in connection with, still talk to, still send messages with. And in fact, I'm actually going back to Thailand at the end of this year, and I'm going to meet with some of those people.
Oh,
and so I had I've had this beautiful gift of all these friendships and connections that I've fostered and developed, because when we met, I connected deeply with each of the people that I had time to spend with, and feel like I sort of created a kind of connection and a bond that goes deeper than just the day-to-day activities of life. Understanding that person's vision, what was important for them, what their dreams were, what kind of life they were trying to create, and them doing the same for me. And now we kind of look out for each other, support each other. I wherever I can, I try and support people to step towards their dreams and visions for their best life. And that's why I love the work of coaching, because that's what I'm doing most of the time when I'm working. And so those, I think if you work in an office environment, let's say, or something like that, or any team, it's quite easy to just drift into those relationships and just let them unfold it however they do. Yeah. Or you can sit down with someone you're going to work with and say, look, we're going to work together for a couple of years. We're both new to the team. We've just started today. Yes. How would you like to have a conversation with me in which we set out how we can really help and support and empower each other to achieve the dreams that we both have? And we can give each other good support, good challenge, good feedback. We can help each other grow. Let's have a purposeful, intentional relationship here. Let's make this really sustainable, because those people that you do that with will be friends for life.
Definitely. Another principle you highlight is paying attention to your spiritual, physical, mental, and emotional health.
Yes.
Maintain a balance in these areas, especially as a marathon runner as well.
Yes. Yeah, I'm not going to pretend it's easy, so it's very challenging for me to keep all those in balance. And some days I feel like I'm, like when you do the tree pose in yoga and you're standing on one leg with your foot by your knee and your hands above your head. I don't know if you know yoga or the tree pose.
Yes.
You sort of wobble, don't you? You kind of stay in balance, but you're sort of wobbling from side to side and making small corrections all the time to stay upright. It's kind of like that, it feels to me. I notice some days I feel a bit tired, a bit low energy state or something. So I'll sit, I think, what's going on for me? Has something happened that kind of violates one of my values? Or is it something to do with my vision? I'm not moving towards my vision. Or is it something to do with a limiting belief I'm stuck with that's stopping me from making progress with a project or something like that? And I'll still sort of check all these inner parts of myself to see where I might need some attention or awareness or some sort of change in my behavior. And that scanning is part of taking care of one's own well-being, because there's no way someone's just going to come along and do that for you. It's impossible. They can't. There's no one can take ownership or responsibility for your well-being.
Correct.
It's something we have to do ourselves. But most of us tend to leave that until there's a crisis, until we're actually really ill, we're almost going to hospital or something, or, we've collapsed or we can't move, and, it's too late at those points. It's gone too far usually. And so I think in the modern world, how that shows up in particularly in work is people get stress, anxiety, they have a burnout and they can't work. They take months of work for sick leave. And these are all signs that we're not really taking care of our well-being, because we've got so much resource inside of us if we know how to calm ourselves down and access it properly, that we can actually always return to this innate well-being that we're born with. Because when we're children, we have this sense of well-being running through us all day long. And we sort of lose it as we get older because we start taking on beliefs about life as adults that aren't true. We start believing them as if they are true, that limit us. So this is always the practice, is to, am I feeding my soul? Is my spirit, really being nurtured and nourished by what I'm doing and what I'm involved with? Are the relationships in my life feeding that? Am I physically well? Am I doing enough exercise? Am I taking care of my physical body? Am I eating well? Am I sleeping well? All these things are really important. We have to balance those.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. So, Ray, you have experienced a lot of change and challenges in your life, especially from being in a leadership position to now focusing on mindfulness, holistic, health, and traveling in 28 countries across different cultures.
Yeah.
What message would you give to all the leaders, especially CEOs or business leaders? Any message?
Yeah, I would say that if you're in a position of leadership, then you are in a truly privileged place, because you have the power to influence the quality of people's lives. You're not in that role simply to accomplish the goals and tasks of the company or whatever. That is part of it. Obviously, the company needs to be sustained. But I see the leadership role much more about fostering and developing a culture that is supporting all of the things we're talking about, because every human being, I think, is trying to find their own path in life towards their peace and happiness. And you can play an amazingly significant role for somebody in guiding and supporting them on that path and nurturing them on that path. And I think leadership for me is much more about, kind of cultivating, nurturing, developing the talents and gifts of human beings so that they can be their best selves. And that is my sixth rule of the 6 rules of happiness. Is all 5 of the first rules are about how you take care of yourself and how you show up for yourself. But the 6th rule is use all of that understanding to empower others, because you can only really, I think, be deeply fulfilled if you're empowering other people to live well. That's how it occurs to me. So that's what I think leadership is really about.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And ownership is definitely a component of that.
Yeah, a component. Yeah, you're right. Definitely.
Lovely, lovely. Another interesting question comes to my mind, Ray. So throughout your travels, were there any specific cultures or experiences that significantly impacted your outlook on life and how you approach today?
Yeah, there were there's a few. But the first one that comes to mind is I had the great fortune to meet Thich Nhat Hanh. He's a Zen Buddhist monk. He died about 2 years ago, age 95.
Wow.
But I had the good fortune to meet him when he was alive and well, and he came to Thailand where I was and gave a meditation retreat for 7 days, which I attended. So I met him and the monks and nuns of his community, which is called Plum Village, and it's based in France. But they're all Vietnamese. They were exiled from Vietnam during the war there in the 70s. And then I went to Plum Village, the monastery in France, for a 3-week retreat in 2014 with him. And his teachings, his way of being, his books have had a massive influence on how I think, feel, and behave. And they continue to do so. And he's been one of my most profoundly impactful teachers, still is. And so that culture was great. But also, on a more day-to-day level, I loved living in Thailand because the culture of the people of Thailand is very much, a happiness-based culture. People smile a lot. They're very kind, very friendly. So I loved being in that kind of atmosphere too. So 2 different ends of the spectrum there.
Beautiful. That's really beautiful. And lastly, Ray, for our listeners who want to learn more about your journey or dive deeper into the lessons you share in Life Without a Tie, how they can connect with you or access your book and other resources.
Yeah, I think the best place to go initially, there is a website called lifewithoutatie.com. And that website's got all the information about the journey, myself, the book. And funnily enough, a lot of people who read the book started writing to me saying, can we see some pictures of those 14 years and some of the things, some of the stories you've described in the book? Because I traveled around India, that's in the book, and people wanted to see stories as well. And so I said, okay, well, we'll put some photographs up from different parts of the journey on the website. And so that's why a lot of people go to the website now, is to see the pictures.
Lovely. That's lovely. We'll mention all the links and show notes for our listeners. And Ray, thank you so much for firstly sharing your incredible journey and the wisdom you have gained along the way. This is invaluable, and your story and your book, Life Without a Tie, it reminds us that happiness and fulfillment come from living authentically and intentionally. So,
Yes.
so much for coming on the show.
You're welcome.
And for those of you listening, be sure to check out Ray's book and explore his 6 rules for happiness. You can refer the links in the show notes along with this episode on your favorite podcast platform. And as always, thank you everyone for joining us here on the Mindful Living podcast. Stay mindful, live with purpose, and we'll see you in the next episode.